All right, thank you so much for coming today. If you haven't seen Design Explosions online, it's a design essay thing that I do. I write like 10,000 words and I critique a design. It's very, very in-depth. I've actually done 3 of them already, so today this is going to be number 4. I'm very excited about it. Now, if you haven't seen Design Explosions before, as I said, it's design critique, but it's different in 3 key ways. These are 3 kind of foundational principles that I think are really, really important and always are in my mind when I'm doing them. Number 1 is understanding that the people that worked on the product that I'm currently analyzing, they're smart and talented. And we forget this on the internet a lot. We're just like, that's dumb, they're dumb, I'm a designer. Happens a lot. Other things. There are things that we can't know if we're not on the team. So many things. And number 3, you can't judge and learn at the same time. Now, what's crazy about these 3 things is that they are not just things that you just say once and then forget. I actually very frequently am like, I do not like those aspects of the design, and I remember this and I go, okay, hold on. These are smart people. There's probably things I don't know, like why might they have done this? So instead of yelling fail, I'm actually trying to figure out why they got there, which really helps. And you can pretty much boil these 3 things down to one concept, and that's giving people the benefit of the doubt. Again, that's another phrase that's easy to say, but like to really live that is actually pretty hard. So what are we going to analyze today? What's the thing we're going to go deep on today? With this benefit of the doubt mentality, we're actually going to do Office Mobile. Now the thing about Office Mobile is very complex, right? PowerPoint, Word, and Excel are 3 very different applications, and then squishing them onto a small screen is also really hard. But the thing about this is I don't need to give the benefit of the doubt. I actually worked on this. So this is going to be like a behind-the-scenes thing. This is going to be painful because I'm going to do more of a sort of VH1 behind the music kind of like this is what really happened kind of thing, rather than doing what most case studies are. The case studies that I've seen are very simple. It's, I am awesome. Our team had this great idea, so we worked for a while. Isn't the result awesome? Now give me a job. That's not going to be this. Like, I'm not trying to make you think I'm a great designer. I actually want to go the other way. I want to do sausage, inside the sausage factory, explaining what it's really like. If you're more of a junior designer, you might be finding yourself going like, wow, this is crazy what you have to go through. That's good, I want you to know that. And if you're more of a senior designer, you're probably going to relate to some of the things that I'm talking about here. And so my challenge to you is please write like this also. Do talks like this also. We need more people talking about what it's really like, and maybe fewer think pieces about why they're great. So, I was on Windows Phone in particular. So I wasn't just doing Office on all mobile devices, I was doing it on Windows Phone. And the thing about that is, we had to figure out what was the app's brand, right? So Office has been around for a really long time, people know how that works. But how would that align with the platform? Because Windows Phone has its own thing going on, what they used to call Metro. So that tension between those 2 things, it's really hard to figure out. Then we've got platform number 2. So how are you going to port this design over to iOS or Android? And then finally, how is that going to align with your app? So this triangle of pain is what all designers have to go through. How much do you do your brand's personality? How much do you go with best practices with the platform? And there's no right answer. This is just a debate that every team I've ever been on has debated. And then let's say you make something for iOS, looks great on iOS, Apple likes your product, that's all great. Then you have to bring it to Android, and Android has material design, and they have very different ideas. So now you have to figure out, okay, we already reconciled the app and the platform, but now we have a second platform. In Microsoft's case, they had the 3 platforms, because they also wanted Windows Phone. So let's compare these 2 things that we had to figure out first. That's what Office looks like, and that's what Windows Phone looks like. I was actually a design lead on Windows Phone. One of the designers reporting to me did that calendar design. So I know a lot about Windows Phone design. I know less about Office design, but you'll notice they do not look similar. So reconciling these 2 things was going to be pretty complicated, and that was something we needed to try to figure out. The other thing is it wasn't just the pixels, it's the relationships. Office and Windows, historically, have not been good friends. The people on these teams are all great people, they're all very talented, they're all trying to do a great job, but let's say Office says, look, we need a new color wheel. We need you to design us a color wheel. The Windows team, more often than not, is going to be like, we just don't have time for that. We're sorry. So these are 2 teams that they want to work well together, but historically, for decades, they've had trouble working very well together. And that's something that continues to this day. Next thing we have to figure out is this platform issue. There's iOS, there's Android, there's Windows Phone. And I think some people will say, oh, well, it's all just touch screens, right? It's just computers in your pocket, and you touch them. It's basically the same. Whatever. They're all converging. I thoroughly disagree. I think if you're a designer, and you really get in there, you start noticing very quickly something very small like the fact that iOS doesn't have a back button. Kaboom, that just touches everything. Now you need a back button in the software, and once you do that, you have to put a nav on the top, but Windows Phone doesn't agree with the nav on the top, and on it goes. But even if there were only a couple differences between platforms, let's say there was only 3 key differences between Windows Phone and Android, even 3 differences can have a huge impact. Because it's not the number of differences, it's how big the differences are. For example, Beyonce, Danny DeVito. 3 big differences, right? Height, gender, color. But of course, it's a very different experience, and that's what happens on these platforms. Finally, let's talk about responsive design. And that little triangle that I showed you, that whole triangle is multiplied by the fact that we have to get things working across all screens. This is a screenshot from Microsoft's style guide for this. But of course, everyone, from web to Android to everybody is thinking about responsive design and has been for years, and this is only going to continue. So that's kind of the background. So I showed up on the team, and I had to figure out, okay, where do I exist? So that's me. And that's cool, I'm the designer. Oh, hold on, here are these 3 other people. That's the head of Word, PowerPoint, Excel. They all have PMs reporting to them, and then of those PMs, they all have engineers working with them. So that's the core team. Except it's not, because now there's a 4th team, and that 4th team is working on more global stuff like printing or saving or services, that kind of thing. They all have an executive that they report to, and then there's like 15 other executives all the way up to the CEO who very much want to know what we're going to ship, because this is Office on Windows Phone, it's a big deal. Then you've got this team over here, they're on campus, they're very nice, it's the iOS and Mac team. Yes, they work at Microsoft, yes, they're doing Office, but they also want Apple to love them so they can win a design award, because that's where their motivations are, because they have to design for the platform. Then over here, you've got the Android team, mostly in India, and they're sort of like a shadow government. They have their own PMs and their own designers and their own engineers and their own opinions about how to make something great on Android. Finally, down here, Windows Phone. I, again, came from Windows Phone, so these are my friends, so that's going to help. But again, the relationship between Windows Phone and Office has been weird over the years. Because Office is installed on Windows Phone by default, so it seems like, oh, this is a Windows Phone design, but it's done by a completely different team. And when I was on Windows Phone, it was my job to maintain that relationship. So when I jumped over to Office, I was maintaining the relationship on the other side. Now, again, I want to reiterate, it's not that any one of these people, number 1, has veto power over any one design, or number 2, that they're malicious. It's just that everyone has their different incentives. The iOS people want a great iOS app. The Office people think everything should look like Office. The Windows Phone people want Metro, that design language, to stay really solid. So everyone has their different motivations. Now, a side note about this slide, it used to have 300 circles on it, and I wasn't exaggerating. I just got tired of drawing. So this is the small version of it, but there's a lot of people that you have to talk to. More locally on the team, I had to think about vertical versus horizontal, and this is a framing that I use all the time. Let's say you're the head of Excel. Let's say you've been there for 10 years. You know every bug, you know every issue, you know what people like, you know what people don't like. That is a deep vertical understanding of Excel. And you probably don't have the same depth of knowledge on the Word side, because you're the Excel PM. It is your job to ship Excel. That's vertical thinking. Then all of a sudden I show up, hey, and I am a horizontal resource. And that's not good or bad, it just is. Imagine at a party, I'm just going to use you, imagine you're the DJ for the party. You are a vertical thinker. It is your job to make the music awesome. And let's say I'm more like the host or the party planner. I don't need to worry about each particular song because you've got that covered, but I'm sort of like this. I'm like, okay, is the food good? Is anyone crying in the bathroom? Like, is the music going on? So horizontal versus vertical, you'll see it in every organization. You have some people that need to kind of think more shallowly and more broadly, and other people that think deeply in their thing, but maybe they're a little bit siloed. So one thing that we did, this worked out great. I was very excited about this. Brought all the PMs in a room. I said, hey, PowerPoint PMs. Pick a team. You're either on Word or Excel. And hey, people on Word, you're either on PowerPoint or Excel. And I jumbled them all up. And for the next 90 minutes, they went up on the whiteboard and they tried to design, this is the first thing they ever did together, they tried to design an app that they don't do for their day job. Now, all these people know each other, they're friends, they have lunch, they share notes, they go to lead meetings together, but they've never had to actually design for another thing. So they started thinking more horizontally. And this is a great example of diversity in the workplace, actually. Like the diversity of opinion, having a PowerPoint person think about how to make Excel better, they're bringing some PowerPoint thinking into it. Meanwhile, I, as the new designer, got to just kind of sit back and like, wow, like I started to really understand the nuances of each app. I showed up thinking all 3 apps, they're just Office apps, you can make them align, but they're actually so different and have so many different things. So this was great. The smiley face represents how great it was. Now, we decided to do 3 explorations. I was the main designer, and then there's just one other designer. She was great, and she did 3 explorations. I said, let's do platform alignment. Let's just make it look like Windows Phone at all costs. Then we'll do a second one that is just forget Windows Phone. Let's just make it look good for Office. And then the third was let's go crazy. So the first one was called Normal, which stands for normal, which stands for, it looks like Windows Phone. It's also my mom's name, which is a nice touch. So that's Windows Phone. And if you look at the information architecture of Windows Phone, it's pretty straightforward, actually. Windows Phone says, hey, look, there's 4 actions that you're going to be able to get to simply. 1, 2, 3, 4. So let's say it's bold, italic, underline, strike through for Word. Then we're like, oh, we ran out of space. Okay, so then you go to a second level, and then there's between 4 and 6 other options tucked away in menu. But that menu doesn't let you go any deeper than that. There's no 3rd level, you can't add other things. So it's 2 levels deep, there's no back arrow. And we realized very quickly, this isn't going to work. Office is so much more complex than 5 or 10 features, so let's try again. So the next one that we looked at was called Tabitha, which stood for tabs. We ended up renaming her to DD for dropdown. But what you see there is you pop up a palette, and then there's a palette picker. Now you notice that word palette. The designer I was working with actually explored this for Photoshop. She said, I want to make something that works not only for something like Word, but also something super complex like Photoshop. How would you put Photoshop onto a tiny screen? So this was her idea. You got your palette, and then you pick your palette. And this excited me so much because here's the information architecture. It's very straightforward. Why don't we optimize for people reading their documents on their phone? And when they get ready to edit, whether that's 20% of the time or 5% of the time, whatever, 1 tap away, they get to palette 1. And that has bold, italic, underline, change font, change color, all the normal stuff. If that's still not good enough, you need to get other places, fine. You get to the palette picker, which is fully scalable. You can actually get to anything else that you want. We liked how there's only 1 thing you can tap to get to edit, and then it's very easy to switch between them. We're very excited. But we thought, okay, we can't land yet, though. We have to do more explorations. So then we needed to do a 3rd one, which would just be weird, just totally new ideas. So we named her Solana. We thought that was a cool, interesting name. And we actually had probably 50 to 100 different screens. But what I particularly liked was the little splash of color on the far left, where there's the 3 dots. What we liked about that was it would jump out. Maybe you could do the brand color there, and there would never be any question what you should tap to get into edit view. So we thought that was kind of cool. If you combined all the 3 things that we liked, on the left there, we liked that it looked like Windows Phone. In the middle there, we liked the scalability, how we could fit all that darn ribbon stuff in there. And on the right, we liked the branding. As a quick side note, it was not an acceptable answer to remove features. People using Word on the phone, they want every feature. And just when you think, oh, we can cut this one feature because it's too hard, that's when everyone gets upset because they want that feature. So, as we were designing, it wasn't okay to do that V1 thinking where you're like, we'll just ship an MVP. Not acceptable. This is mature software. So this is what we landed on. The one on the left is actually a standard Windows Phone control. It's called the minimized app bar. And it just says, hey, look, there's nothing here, but if you tap those 3 dots, we'll show you stuff. The one in the middle is not standard. That was brand new. That was our design. And we thought, okay, that's where we put things. And then finally, there is your picker. So it's coming along pretty well. We put together some decks. Here's a deck with us saying, hey, look, when you tap something, you get a keyboard. And if you tap the color blue there on the bottom, you get some formatting stuff. Won't that be cool? We even did a motion study to kind of show everybody what we were going to do. So I'm going to show you. There's a person scrolling up and down. There's a typo at the top of the screen. So they tap, zooms in. You can edit that typo. Then you select it, you tap down at those 3 dots. Ah, there's the ribbon. There's the big, complicated, crazy ribbon that we're so used to seeing on desktop. But there it is, fitting into that smaller space. So we thought that's pretty cool. And then they're going to switch between the tabs. There it is. Go team. Now, I'm telling this story in a very linear way. We did this, then we did this, then we did this. Anyone that's done hard software understands, of course, there was so much more discussion and debate and so on. And part of that kind of hidden discussion was me talking to the Android and iOS teams to make sure that what we were doing was not too Windows Phone, because of course iOS has its own thing. So they did their own motion study, and you'll notice this is quite similar. There it is, coming from the bottom. The animations are a little bit different. The way that they do drill downs, in a second when they tap the font, it will slide to the right. So that's more of an iOS kind of thing. As a side note, this is before iOS 7 redesigned everything, and before material design, and before Windows 10 merged everything. So this is all kind of before that. One small difference though, if I can, no, I don't know how to. I can't go back on screen, but one small difference is that the 3 dots actually have a circle around it, and the iOS people were saying like that's more iOS, so you can do that. Sounds great. Then over here on Android, since I can't stop the footage, I just have to show you really quick. Notice that there's no Chrome right there, but then there is. Okay. So that distinction was because the Android people felt very strongly that there should be no Chrome at all until you tap the screen. And we agreed with that sort of philosophically, but it also meant that, like, well, how are you going to tap on an item to edit it? How do you actually say, like, I would like to place my cursor to start typing? So we were kind of discussing all these ideas with them, and it was coming along pretty well. But the biggest issue that I was dealing with, pun intended, was trying to make sure that we were aligned between tablet and phone. Now, when people see this, they often, like executives at Microsoft, when they saw this screen, they would all use the same word. And I'm really tired of hearing this word because it's being misused, and that's the word consistent. Everyone, I read a design book once, and I heard that consistency is important. And yes, it is true that consistency is very important, but only if you're making it predictable. Predictable is the actual word that you're going for. Consistency is a shortcut to get there often. The consistency argument that they would make here is they'd say, well, why don't you put the ribbon at the top? Or maybe on the tablet, you could put everything on the bottom. Like, wouldn't that be more consistent? So I got really good at writing the exact same whiteboard sketch. It looks like this. Hey, so on Surface, you put it all on the top, and then on phone, you put it on the bottom. But what if we were to flip it? Well, you go over here and you say, hey, Surface, why don't we put it on the bottom? But then it would conflict with the keyboard, frowny face. So then on the phone, you could try putting it on the top, but then when the keyboard deploys, you've got this weird Venetian blind effect where you can barely see your content. That's why we have to make them different, even though they're inconsistent. Ta-da! So, this is, I mean, they're good questions. You should always ask about consistency. But it was just very clear to us, not only with our guts, but with user testing, like, of course, it should be different. So we came up with a term, and we should use this term because it's magic. The term is earned differences. The idea behind an earned difference is that you assume that 2 screens will be the same until you have justified why it should be different. In this case, this is pretty airtight. Other things are maybe a little bit more up in the air, but that's what we did. So we ended up here, and we thought, okay, it's going to be on the bottom. You're open by default, closed by default. And then you can deploy it. Now, in this particular one, the visual design is not aligned yet, but we were getting there. And then there it is closed. All right, next. They said, what are you going to do about hero actions, John? And I said, what's this hero action thing? So, well, do you see these items up at the top? Those are really important to Office. They're called hero actions. And we want to be able to feature things up there. So, well, why can't you just put it in the ribbon? They said, well, if they get put in the ribbon, then people don't find them. And I said, okay, well, look, is it really that important to do? And they said, well, yeah, for example, undo and redo. Do you really want someone in Excel doing some super complex, spreadsheet, but there's no undo? You just do the thing, and it saves to the cloud, and you just can't get it back. I said, okay, that's a good point. So we were starting to look into, like, well, I don't know, maybe we just like put some Chrome up in the top at all times, but that just seemed awful. We didn't know what to do, and we really liked our palette design on the bottom, so we thought, well, could we maybe tuck something away? And besides, what are we even putting up there other than undo, redo? Is there anything else? It turns out there's lots of stuff, and I will jump to the end and show you one of the better examples, and that's reading view on Word. Now, the one on the right, that looks more like a Kindle, the one on the right is what they wanted to ship by default, but the user research was unanimous. People hated opening up a document that they were done doing on their Windows machine. They hated looking on it on their phone and believing that we reformatted it. That was just unacceptable. So we knew you have to load in the far left, which we call print view. That's what it looks like with printed. And then you could opt into this toggle that would get you to this reading view. And what we found is that people wanted to start on the left, go to the right, make a change, but then toggle back to make sure that their changes were actually there. One example of that is a menu in a restaurant where you're like, salmon, and then like like $19. Like, that looks horrible on the right, and so they would really want to make sure it looked good on the left. So that was an example of something they needed access to quickly at all times. But that didn't stop us from trying to bury it. In this visual, what you see is you tap 3 dots, and then in the middle, you notice there's an undo, and then there's that weird little icon there. That was reading view and undo. And we thought, okay, that could work. Now, I'm compressing maybe about 3 months of discussion, but I would talk to this PM, and they'd say, I don't really feel good about reading view being tucked away. And I'd be like, I hear you, but let's see if we can do it. And I would talk to another PM, and they'd say, look, in PowerPoint land, the idea that it's too hard to get to presentation mode, that's just unacceptable to us. And I'd be like, I hear you, but and by the time you start adding up, like everybody having their issues with the design, not to mention users who couldn't find this feature, it just wasn't working. And so I had to get over it. Now what I was trying to get out of here is I was trying to get out of using the hamburger. Didn't want to just throw a bar on top and put a hamburger up there and call it a day. It seemed like there had to be something that we could do, and I was maneuvering my little design ship the best that I could, but it was starting to kind of take on water, shall we say. So, I'm going to mix the metaphors. This is the straw that broke the camel's back on the boat of design. The file menu. Now, as a mobile designer, I'm like, I don't need a file menu. What's saving stupid? Whatever, it's mobile. The fact is, I did not have the convenience of having hardware devices do 2 different things. We used to live in a world where Windows Phone was a separate operating system from Windows, or your iPhone was a separate operating system from your Mac, which it still is now, but you're starting to see blending with iPad Pro and stuff. When things were divided, you could say things like that, but they're not now. Now, I was starting to get rumors that Windows Phone and Windows were going to merge, which has since happened. And people were saying, John, your design on the Windows Phone, you're going to be able to plug a monitor in and it's going to unpack itself into full Windows. And I was like, oh dear, now we're talking about responsive design. True responsive design, this is hardcore stuff. I've been doing responsive design since before it had a name. I am like super cutting edge web design guy. I totally get all this stuff. But I guess I thought I could get away with it and not have to do it on mobile. But I did. Now, did that stop me from still trying to cram it away somewhere? Of course not. This is a horrible graphic. I had about 100 explorations. I tried to pick up one of the most ugly ones. So here is me trying to put the hamburger next to the drop-down, but then the drop-down also has file. But if you hit the hamburger, it takes you to file. I don't even understand what's happening here. But this is us trying really, really hard to ignore what we already knew about responsive design. And there's a couple tenets about it. Let's take a website that's really big, got a lot of stuff up there, right? And we know that in responsive design, as you reduce the size, you can't show as much stuff, right? So a hamburger shows up, now you can't fit as much stuff. So what happens when you go to a phone? Well, a phone, now you have to start stacking things vertically. Now, I want to say something about this. I think some people refer to responsive design as like a fad, or like, oh, it's just what we're doing right now, maybe it'll pass. And even if it doesn't pass, like, is it really that big of a deal? And I say yes. I'm going to say that this is like design physics. That suitcase will just not fit in that space. It just won't happen. I mean, you can make arguments like you could break it or whatever, but like, without some weird change, this is just physics. And I'm sorry for the scientists in the room who are like probably upset that I'm using the word physics so loosely, but that's how I think of it. I think of it as design physics. There are just too many things to fit on that space, and when you're making a design that needs to kind of stretch and flex, you need to handle that. In fact, let me double down on this, let me go even further. This is going to be a wacky thing to say. Get your camera ready for the next slide, because it's going to be provocative. I believe that this is galaxy-wide. I believe that this is as fundamental as anything we've ever seen in communication design. I believe that if you found an alien life form, let's assume 3 things before I make this crazy point. Number 1, let's assume there's aliens. Number 2, let's assume they have eyes, right? So they registered data in this way. And number 3, let's say they are advanced enough that they have discovered graphic design. Even alien life forms use the hamburger menu. I believe that very deeply. Because again, it's not necessarily a hamburger. I'm not saying they're using those 3 lines. They probably have some alien thing that represents that. But this concept that you couldn't fit stuff, so then you tucked it away, that's just fundamental to the galaxy. That's just a common thing that you have to handle. It's like, let's say they have billboards in this alien world. When you design a billboard, you use larger text so it can be seen from further away. This is just the basics of visual design. When you try to take that same billboard and make it into a business card, guess what? Things are going to change. This is designing based on context. This is, we all know this as designers. But that's graphic design. Let's talk a little bit about information architecture. When I walk into your home, and I walk into your kitchen, I can easily turn on the sink, I can turn on the lights, I can turn on the stove. These are top tier things. And then you have that moment, everyone's experienced this on both sides of it, where you're like, where are your glasses? Are your glasses here? And then you find the glasses and they're all grouped together. That's information architecture. Now, you could make the argument that glasses should just be everywhere, so you never have to look, but that's not what information architecture teaches us. It says, it might be a little bit harder to get to that second tier thing, but then you'll find it and they're all grouped, it all makes sense. The glasses are probably next to the coffee mugs. It's information architecture. So let's go a little bit further. I'm in your house, we're having a party, and I pull you aside because you're the owner of the home, and I say, hey, where are your candles? And you say, hang on a sec. And you walk me to some weird corner of your kitchen that no one knows to look for, and they pull something out, and it's the junk drawer. The junk drawer is awesome. But let's say that because I read a thing on the internet, I took your junk drawer and I just dumped it out into the sink, and I said, obvious always wins. Or, I've just increased engagement of your candles. You would point out, rightfully, but I did not want increased engagement with my candles. I wanted those things tucked away. Also, please clean that up. So this weird design that I was doing over here, it was actually a philosophical reaction to like, oh, I don't want to do a hamburger. No one on Redmond's campus wanted to do a hamburger. There's no political capital that would allow you to do a hamburger. Hamburgers are the worst. But this was even worse than that. This is just a really bad design. And so we said, okay, look, fine. Let's start over. People have been seeing me fight about this for like a year, and I finally was like, all right, start over, reset. We know we need hero actions. The idea that you need to be able to undo quickly, it's just fundamental. All our data is showing that we need that in reading view. We just do. You just can't debate this anymore. You can't tuck it away. Okay, well, once you have that, you might as well put bar on the top. And if you're going to put bar on the top, look, you've got this file menu that people expect to see at the top left. Let's just put a hamburger up there. It's fine. And, oh, by the way, one of the things that I was arguing with the PMs about, document title. I was so obsessed with not putting a bar on the top, because that's not what Metro does, that I was actually telling people, you don't need to know the name of the document you're in. You just, it's fine. You'll figure it out. And it wasn't until we did this where I was like, what was I even thinking? Like, what was I arguing against? So that's where we landed, and then, boop, you'll notice, I don't know if you noticed, but I just added the palette on the bottom. And people would ask me, like, John, you were so excited about the design where you could only tap one thing. Like, aren't you sad that there's so many things now? No. I would have been sad, like, in theory, if I had gone back in time a year and like, you're going to end up with a design with like 5 things to touch. But we earned the right to do all of these things. We understood why they were all important. Now, I did this slide half jokingly, and then it got famous. This is I Heart the Hamburger. It's the takeoff of the I Heart Windows Phone t-shirts. People are very grumpy about this. All right, so one last story about how this all went down, and it kind of gets to the big point that I learned from this whole project. This was a deck that I received from a very smart, very talented PM, and it was his job to think about on-object UI, OOUI. So for example, when you right-click that menu that pops up, that's what Microsoft calls OOUI. This is one of the slides in this deck, and you'll notice there's a question mark up at the top right. Why is there a question mark at the top right? Because that's my design. He's like, I don't know how we're going to do right-clicking on Windows Phone. Let's go talk to John. His proposal was, look, on tablet we're going to do this. We're going to have something called the skittle, these 3 dots. You're going to tap on a word, you're going to get a skittle. If you tap a skittle, you get the Mo floaty. This guy loves naming things, apparently. And there's something. We talked about it. The thing is, this guy's real smart. It's not hard for him to comprehend that, like, maybe that's not going to fit that well. What you see there on the left is a little floating copy icon, and then what you see on the right is his proposal. It doesn't fit. But even if you could make it fit through some kind of scrolling or whatever, you have this other issue called horizontal mode. In landscape mode, you just don't really have the real estate to be fancy like this. So I did one of my tricks. If you talk to anyone that I work with and you say, hey, tell me about working with Jon Bell, they're pretty much all going to talk about my 2-minute videos. I do this thing where I take a Sharpie and I just scrawl out some comics about what I think we should do, and then I narrate over the top of it, I make it into a video, and I ship it out to the company, or to my team, or whatever. So I'm going to do that right now. I'm going to do my 2-minute thing just to show you, like, this is pretty much exactly what I sent out to everybody. Hi everybody, today I'd like to talk about on-object UI. On-object UI is what happens when you tap on a thing. Now there's 3 ways that you can do it. Side note, I'm going to go through slides faster than you can read them, which is part of the charm of this. So there's 3 ways you can do it. Windows Phone does the icon, Office does the 3 dots, and then of course there's long press, but we're not going to talk about that today. Now, big insight that we came across. We need rich copy and paste, not just text. So for example, in Excel, you need to copy a column. In Word, you need to copy and paste images, and in PowerPoint, you need to copy slides. Unfortunately, Windows Phone literally does not support this. If you copy a paragraph of text on Windows Phone and one of the words is bolded, they discard it because that's just like literally not possible. Insight number 2, Office needs the ability to paste without deploying SIP. SIP means keyboard. Well, how would you paste a column or an image or a slide if you had to first get the keyboard to show? It doesn't make sense. You need to be able just to press on something and have it show up. Hey everybody, this is a showstopper. This is not good. So we could do one of two things. Office does the clipboard, or Windows does, which would mean a dependency. Now, we can't fragment. We can't have Office do it because you wouldn't be able to copy and paste across apps, which is kind of a fundamental thing. Can't fragment. This is a big deal. No. We have a plan though. We can do this. Look, we should go from the icon to text for a lot of reasons. And instead of making it be in the keyboard, we're going to put it in line right there. Oh, and by the way, we have another idea where we need to have extensibility. We need the ability to have copy-paste within the 3 dots because Office has so many more features than just copy-paste. So that's the plan. P1 is that, P0 is that, P1 is that, and this is how it's going to look. So I said that. Now I want you to shift from designer thinking, where we're like, fight for the user, do the right thing. I want you to shift your thinking for a second to what it's like to be a PM. PM is right there, it's a friend of mine. Look at this slide. Your designer is coming to you and saying, you are about to break copy and paste, and it's not going to look consistent. It's going to make it look like Microsoft doesn't even know what it's doing. Although, we would ship with one less dependency. That thing that I put in the parenthetical is his whole job. When I talked to him, I said, like, hey, what's this going to take? And it turned out it was going to take 2 years to do it the right way, to rely on Windows to get the copy-paste stuff. 2 years. So he's literally having to decide, okay, I'm 24 years old, this is my first big job out of school, my manager said ship on Object UI, but I'm just going to hand it over to a completely different organization and just wait patiently for 2 years. And hopefully they'll ship it, because 9 times out of 10 they end up cutting the feature because they're Windows and they don't really care about what we need on Office. Which leads me to this visual. All right, I'm going to draw 4 people. First one is the PM, the second one is the engineer, the third one is the marketer, and the fourth one is the designer. And I want you to think about the balance that they all go through when they're trying to design something. PM, I want to make something awesome, but also ship on time. Big part of that job. Engineer, I want to make something awesome, but I'm cautious about tech debt. Big part of their job. Marketer, that has to actually make money for the company. I want to make something awesome that I know will sell in this marketplace. And here comes the designer with their great insight and their great counterbalance. I want to make something awesome. That's it. That is a big problem. That is what I like to call the privilege of design thinking. Being a designer is amazing and it is awesome, and I've done it for a long time and I love it so much. But we have to understand, the other people that we're working with, it's not that they hate great design or that they hate their user or that they just haven't thought of it. It's that they have these crazy counterbalances to what they're thinking about. We get to parade in as designers and be like, because it's awesome. And they have to go, well, it's awesome, but it's going to take 2 years. Or it's awesome, but we have a competitive threat. I was actually working at Frog Design. Things were going really well with this client. I delivered a pitch, it went really well, and then I pulled the client aside to a side room. And I said, hey, by the way, the things that I said between slide 8 and 12 are technically not possible. I was saying things that are untruths, like they just can't, they can't ship. And he said, oh, we know that. And I was like, well, why aren't you upset? And he said, it is not your job to ship, it's your job to inspire. And I thought, wow. He's like, just let the engineers and the PMs handle it. I thought, this is crazy. Frog Design's getting all this money, I'm getting a salary for things that we know are not possible. That's a huge privilege on the design team. So this next slide is the last slide. I want you to think about those things that I was saying before about design explosions. Understand that when you're critiquing someone on the internet, just assume that they're smart and talented, assume that there are things that you don't know that they had to go through, and assume that, and know that you can't judge and learn at the same time. And I want you to think about your own team. I want you to maybe think about a PM or an engineer that you work with, especially one that you maybe don't get along with. I want to leave you with this final thought. The team currently building this product with you is smart and talented. There are things that you can't know and are not incentivized to think about. You can't judge and learn at the same time, so listen more and you will design better. Thank you very much. So time-wise, I think our session goes till 2:30. Does that sound accurate? Does anyone know? I think that's right. So we have some time for Q&A if anyone has any questions. Yes? Yes? Yeah.
The big question is, how'd you solve the copy problem?
Yeah, so I left on a cliffhanger on purpose. I will show you what we did. I actually left the company, so I don't know the details of our ships. That sounds more dramatic than I did. It wasn't because of this. This is what they shipped. This is today on Windows Phone. If you were to have a Windows Phone, there's not many of us, but if you have a Windows Phone, you were to download, this is what it looks like. And what you see up in the top left corner of the left image, there's the hamburger. It works like you'd expect. It comes in from the side. Then there's search, and it's, as much as I was afraid of putting too many hero actions, I think search, you could argue why search should be there at all times. Then the next one says reading view. The third icon is Google Docs. The third icon says collaborate. The Google Docs threat to Microsoft is so fundamental to where they make their money. It was very important to them that everybody knows on Word, you can collaborate here too. And I argued against it pretty dismissively. I kept being like, look, we can't just throw things up there that we're concerned about. But I understand why they did it. Like, Microsoft has to fight Google Docs, so they thought it was very important to put it up there. Then the middle one, when you select stuff, that's just the keyboard, pretty standard. And then over there on the side, the palette ended up looking pretty much the way we had originally designed it. For comparison's sake, let me show you Android. You'll notice they have a lot more hero actions. And again, it's easy to be like, oh, they just don't know what they're doing. They're just bad. They just didn't communicate. Actually, what's really happening here, and this is something that I know at Twitter, one of the things that I do at Twitter is I design for emerging markets, making the app load faster, take less data, work offline more effectively, just a bunch of little things like that to make sure it works. And in Android usage, you see a lot of people in emerging markets, and people in emerging markets find that data is very expensive. So they have a floppy disk up there. Why? Because when you save automatically, and you're doing it every minute, because you want to make sure no one loses data, you're just destroying people's data plan. Additionally, I don't know if this is exactly what happened, but additionally, Android's APIs for saving chunks at a time versus saving the whole thing every time, they're not as robust as you see on iOS. So little differences like that. It's like, hey, if we know this is going to be used in emerging markets, we know emerging markets has extensive data, let's give them a manual save icon. And what else? They also have, otherwise it's pretty much the same. And then finally, here's iOS. And iOS is interesting because Apple feels very strongly that you should not use the hamburger menu. And I know that I said earlier, like even aliens use the hamburger menu. I actually agree with Apple on this one. I think that just throwing everything in it all the time is a bit of an overreach. I actually agree more with what's happening here. At the top left, they have a back arrow that takes you to your documents. And then the second one over, that is the file menu. I don't know if the icon is very clear, but they actually split it into two because they wanted each one to do what it does. Also, I want to show you the middle one there. That's the on-object UI that Apple did at the OS level, where it belongs, so other people can hook into it. That's ideal, but again, we didn't have the benefit of 2 or 3 years to wait for that, so it's a trade-off we had to make. Honestly, I don't know all the fights that went into getting it done, but when I got my Windows Phone, I went and I copied something from Excel, and then I went over to a completely different app, and I tried to paste, and it worked. So they at least shipped a functional clipboard, even though the visuals were a little bit different. So thank you for that question. Any other questions? I love questions, and I have so much respect for people that hold up their hand because I know it's super scary. At this point, my heart is always thumping. So I'm like, I want to ask you a question, but it's hard. Any last ones? That person just scratched his head. I thought he was going to ask a question. Right. Thank you very much.